This is 5 on 20 News with Luke Goodhart.
I'm Frank Powers, coming to you live from our studios in downtown Tucson. It's a rainy Wednesday, July 19th. Let's first talk local headlines.
Let's do it, Frank. Former Superintendent Tom Horn testified yesterday to defend his decision to end a Mexican-American studies course taught in TUSD schools. Horn said he was concerned that the material being taught in these classes promoted extremist behavior among students. He said that the program was based on a, quote, divisive, separatist, politicized pedagogy that taught students to see themselves as oppressed rather than individuals who control their own destinies. How inspiring. He also said that he found the curriculum to be racist and made Latino students feel like they were victims. Horn especially took issue with a classroom that had a Che Guevara poster on the wall. In defending himself against charges of being racist himself, he claimed that he wants to eliminate all ethnic studies classes, not just Mexican-American-based classes. Because if you're racist towards all races but white people, you're not really a racist, you're just a garden variety white supremacist. However, he never explained why he didn't just keep the program and change the curriculum. He also didn't say whether he would cancel all world history classes, since they're all pretty much ethnic studies classes. The ethnic studies program is going on trial this week to determine if a ban against the program is constitutional. In 2010, then-Governor Jan Brewer signed HB 2281, which restricted public school districts from offering ethnic studies classes. This law was drafted by Horn, then defended by Horn when he later became Attorney General, making him the Leonardo da Vinci of racist laws.
That was an excellently done story, I feel. The White House reportedly met with 3 political opponents of Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, according to Politico. If the reports are true, then this could mean that the White House is hoping to see the ousting of Flake, who has butted heads with the Trump administration on some issues. Flake is also predicted to potentially lose his seat in 2018 midterm elections due to the state of Arizona moving more left in the past few years. According to the Politico report, officials from the Trump administration met with Arizona Treasurer Jeff DeWitt, Arizona Republican Party Chairman Robert Graham, and Dr. Kelly Ward, who was one of Flake's past primary opponents. Both DeWitt and Graham have not officially announced their candidacy, but are exploring a run and are both solid Trump supporters. White House officials shockingly denied the meeting, but Politico said that they likely don't want to exert too much pressure on Flake so close to the vote on healthcare legislation. Because if you're going to backstab a member of your own party, you might as well try to get their vote first. We're all truly heartbroken that that gambit didn't work out for you.
TUSD is holding events this week at family resource centers throughout Tucson in order to provide families with school supplies. Along with the school supplies, families can also get clothes and haircuts for their children while they learn about programs in their districts. Tomorrow is the last day for these back-to-school bashes, and it will be held at the Catalina Family Resource Center, located at 3645 East Pima Street. Families will receive 1 complimentary outfit from the on-site clothing bank, hygiene kits, school supplies, complimentary haircut vouchers, and more. The event runs from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. and supplies are first come, first served, so get there early.
Get there early, especially if you have exceptionally smelly children. If you're feeling like you just can't even today, you're not alone. According to a study by the website Wallet Hub, Tucson is the most stressed out city in Arizona, if you can believe it. The site studied the 150 largest U.S. cities across 4 metrics, which included health and safety, work, financial, and family stress. Tucson was ranked 50 on the list overall, while Newark, New Jersey, and Detroit, Michigan won the top spots for most stressed. Other Arizona cities on the list were Glendale at number 56, Phoenix at 58, Gilbert at 144, and an easy-going Scottsdale at 147. Because what are you stressed about if you live in Scottsdale? Except maybe that you're living in that one travel blog. You live in a place that one travel blogger described as both a suburban nightmare and the most depressing textbook example of what's wrong with the American landscape and lifestyle. Sounds like a fun blog. But I guess if you live in Scottsdale, you can probably afford a sketchy private door with an all-you-can-eat, a sketchy private doctor with an all-you-can-eat Xanax buffet. Now in national and international news.
A recent study by the Federal Reserve found that student debt is lowering homeownership rates among millennials. The study looked at 9 student cohort studies and concluded that increases in public tuition and the resulting debt accounts for an 11 to 35% reduction in homeownership rates for 28 to 30-year-olds in the years between 2007 and 2015. Compared to the same group in 2011, homeownership rates were 7.74 percentage points lower. The study also found that despite the rise in tuition, the number of students enrolling in higher education hasn't decreased. The authors say that this shows the necessity of higher education in the workforce. Usually, when products increase in price, consumers buy less, but this wasn't the case for higher education. Rather, the authors say that people are accruing more debt because of the higher prices. They said that policymakers might be tempted to think that it doesn't make sense to fund public higher education because it doesn't have an impact on how many people enroll. However, they say that lowering the payments to public universities shifts the burden to students, who later are less able to buy a home, which could negatively impact the economy. So, in conclusion, students are too in debt from their education to go further in debt for their home.
The system works. Republicans released their $1.1 trillion spending plan for next year, which includes $203 billion in mandatory cuts to 11 government agencies. If approved, this would represent the largest amount of deficit reduction in 2 decades. This included deep cuts to the temporary assistance to needy families, commonly referred to as the welfare system, the social services block grant, and supplemental security income, or SSI. The cuts will enable Republicans to reform the tax system, which they say will be the biggest change to the system in decades. In order to enact the tax reform, Congress would need to ensure that it doesn't raise the national debt, hence the cuts. Along with the cuts to social services, the House Judiciary Committee was targeted for $45 billion in cuts. Most of these will likely come from the medical malpractice reform, which would make it harder for patients to sue hospitals for incorrect diagnosis and other mistakes. The bill also contains more cuts to Medicaid spending beyond what was targeted in the Republican health care bill. However, some Republicans are already worried about supporting a bill that makes huge cuts to popular government programs. On the other hand, the fiscal conservatives in the Freedom Caucus have not yet came out in support of the legislation because they think the cuts should be even deeper. Currently, it looks like Republicans don't even have enough votes to pass the bill, which would deal them another defeat after their attempt at replacing the Affordable Care Act failed this week. Again.
Oh, poor guys. Let's stay on that Republican spending proposal because tucked deep somewhere in there is a call to open up the Alaska Wildlife Refuge to oil drilling. The House Budget Committee asked that the Natural Resources Committee pass legislation to reduce the government's deficit by $5 billion over 10 years. This would be accomplished by opening up the protected area to drilling, where revenues from fees and royalties would be used to pay off government debt. Democratic Representative John Yarmuth of Kentucky has already proposed an amendment to remove the refuge provision. The Trump administration assumed that the move would bring in $1.8 billion in government income over the next decade. The oil industry, unsurprisingly, supported the attempts to open up the refuge to drilling, with the American Petroleum Institute spokesperson Brooke Salmon saying that Alaskans are largely supportive of the measure. But environmentalists say that opening up the refuge to drilling would be disastrous for the planet and increase the rate of climate change. But as we know from our president, climate change was invented by the Chinese government for some reason, so we shouldn't worry too much about it.
You like numbers? A House committee approved a big, beautiful bill to fund 28 miles of that big, beautiful wall, which is looking less big and beautiful by the minute. The Homeland Security bill passed the House Appropriations Committee and allocated $1.57 billion for border infrastructure funds. This includes $498 million for the 28 miles of new wall in the Rio Grande Valley, amounting to $17.8 million per mile. The bill includes more numbers, like another $784 million for 32 miles of new border fencing in the same area and $251 million for 14 miles of secondary fencing along the San Diego border. This adds up to the $15 million already allocated for 2017 to replace 40 miles of primary fencing along the San Diego and El Paso borders. The 2018 spending bill also includes funding for mobile video surveillance systems, ground sensors, towers, and funds for combating cross-border tunnels. In recent weeks, the Trumpster has backed off from his call for the full-length border wall, seeming to admit that it's impossible, except not in those words, of course, because You know, I'm sure it's fabulous. Last week, Trump said that there are certain areas along the border that already have natural walls, such as the Rio Grande River. Rather, Trump said that 700 to 900 miles of wall will do. It's worth mentioning that there's already over 600 miles of border fencing, so this should be an easy goal to meet now. White House officials say that the additional 28 miles of wall will help keep the border safe as long as the migrants don't walk 28 miles to where the wall ends with a canoe.
The House voted to delay an Obama administration rule on ozone pollution on Tuesday and also voted to limit future regulations that crack down on the pollutant. The House voted 229 to 119, passing a bill introduced by Representative Pete Olson of Texas, which would slow down the regulatory timeline of the rule. The rule lowers the acceptable level of ozone and would require the EPA reconsider the ozone rule every 10 years rather than the current timetable of 5. Republicans, businesses, and manufacturers largely supported the bill, claiming that it would help businesses get into compliance with the new rules without facing consequences from the government. Environmental groups and Democrats opposed the bill, claiming that it would impact the health of Americans.
Well, it looks like the robots aren't quite ready to take over yet, Carlin. A robot security guard meant to provide surveillance at a Washington, D.C. shopping mall fell into the mall's fountain yesterday, surrounded by confused onlookers. The robot met his watery grave after it fell down a flight of stairs leading into the fountain, which I feel is a terrible place to put stairs. The K5 patrol bot was fished out of the water by a passerby who breathed a sigh of relief that humankind had a little more time before being taken over by the machines. An investigation confirmed that the fall was not suspicious and that the robot fell by itself. Authorities are looking into whether the robot has a history of depression and whether the fall was purposeful or if it was just texting. The defunct droid has been sold to a Jawa clan who retrofitted it with an Astromech R2 unit processor and sold it to a family of hardscrapple moisture farmers on planet Tatooine. Looks like I won't have time to go over the Toshi station to pick up those power converters after all. This was 5 on 20 News. I'm Frank Powers.
I'm Luke Skywalker.
Stay dry, Tucson. May the creativity be with you.
Stay cool.